Look, the coaching carousel is spinning fast right now, and honestly, some of the moves happening around the league are about to shake things up in ways we need to pay attention to. I'm talking about decisions that could completely change the landscape of our division and beyond. Trust me, what's developing with certain organizations right now isn't just NFL noise, it's stuff that directly impacts how we're building this team moving forward. What's up, Cowboys? Welcome to the NFL Playbook Cowboys. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This channel is all about breaking down everything you need to know about America's team. So, let me start with the big one that's got everyone talking. John Harbaugh potentially heading to the Giants. I mean, the buzz is getting louder by the day, and from what I'm hearing, New York is pushing hard to get this deal done. They've already satisfied the Rooney Rule and everything, so there's nothing stopping them from making it official. And honestly, I'd bet on him becoming their next head coach at this point. Now, here's where it gets interesting for us. If Harbaugh does land with the Giants, we need to ask ourselves, how worried should we be? Like, is this a Pete Carroll 2.0 situation where it's not that big of a deal? Or are we looking at something more like Andy Reid taking over the Chiefs? That's a legitimate concern because Harbaugh is a proven winner, and seeing him in our division twice a year isn't exactly ideal. It would be a significant addition for New York, and frankly, it makes an already tough division even tougher. But you know what? Let's shift gears and talk about what we're doing on our end, because the defensive coordinator search is actually pretty fascinating. We've got 2 new interviews to discuss, which brings our total up to 8 candidates now. That's right, 8. And I've got to say, the approach this time around feels different. It feels real. First up is Christian Parker, who's currently the Eagles' defensive backs coach and passing game coordinator. Now, this guy's resume is pretty solid. He's been with Philly since 2024, and before that, he was the Broncos' defensive backs coach. What's interesting here is the connections. We're talking about the Vic Fangio, Ejiro Evero, Vance Joseph overlap in Denver. And here's something I really like. He's got that college coaching background at A&M and Notre Dame, where he worked under Mike Elko, who's known as a really strong defensive mind. So honestly, I'm extremely interested in Christian Parker. He fits exactly what we've been searching for. He's young, he's got that college background, and he has a secondary focus. The Vic Fangio system in general is really good, and honestly, a lot of these interviews we're doing are with coaches who come from some of the better coaching trees on the defensive side of the ball. What really gets me excited, though, is this. He's never been a defensive coordinator before. 0 head coach or coordinator history, and that is so anti-Cowboys. And I mean that in the most positive way possible. Like, this is what I've been begging for years from this organization, to do a real search, and we're actually getting it at the defensive coordinator spot. Now, don't get me wrong, what matters in the end is the hire itself. You have to get the hire right. But the process, the search so far, I'm giving it high marks. Then we've got Charlie Bolan, who was the interim Giants defensive coordinator this year. He was previously their outside linebackers coach, and before that, he's got college coaching background at Illinois, where he worked alongside Jim Leonard. He was also the Cardinals outside linebackers coach and assistant linebackers coach there, so there's a lot of Vance Joseph overlap again. I actually reached out to someone who covers the Giants closely, and they said Bolan was honestly solid. They think he got better each week for a guy who had never been a defensive coordinator before. He runs an aggressive, focused defense, which we all like, right? Plus, he's got those Vance Joseph ties, which is definitely a good thing. And apparently, he was very creative with Abdul Carter, who was a big focal point for the Giants this past year. And here's what I want to remind everyone about Bolan, and really all these candidates. We're doing a real search here. If you don't want Bolan, that's totally fine. You've got 7 other people to pick from. We're not doing the 3 or 4 interview process and saying, okay, here are your options, take it or leave it. I'll give this organization credit for that. Now, something interesting about Bolan, the Giants could potentially reject the interview request if they hire Harbaugh, though I'm not sure he'd necessarily be a Harbaugh guy. Anyway, wouldn't be surprised if he's available for a different role too, which brings up an interesting point. He could potentially still be on staff even if he doesn't get the defensive coordinator job. Like if we end up hiring Jim Leonard, we've already got Aaron Whitecotton under contract who could come back as the defensive line coach. Both Zach Orr and Charlie Bolan were sitting defensive coordinators who might be out of a DC job this year, and they both happen to coach linebackers. Could they be in play for position coach roles? Maybe Efren Banda is available as a secondaries coach depending on how the Browns coaching staff sorts out. I'm just putting that out there as something that's potentially possible.
So just to recap where we're at, the 8 names we know of so far are Durante Jones, Jim Leonard, Ephraim Banda, Aaron Whitecotton, Jonathan Gannon, Zach Orr, Christian Parker, and Charlie Bolan. They've mostly come in groups of 3. I'm curious if we'll get a third name alongside Parker and Bolan. Also worth noting, we initially got denied the request to interview Jeff Ulbrich, but I think we'll revisit that if he becomes available once his contract protection with the Falcons expires. Now, let me get to what might be the most intriguing part of this whole thing, Brian Flores. His contract expires today, which means he can interview for a lateral move to defensive coordinator without permission. And get this, Washington is actually interviewing him today, which makes me wonder, okay, what are we waiting for here? The Vikings seem to think they're going to retain him. Kevin O'Connell came out and said they're being aggressive trying to get something done with him, but they also want to be respectful and let him go through whatever process he needs to. But based on his conversations, he's got a lot of confidence they'll get something done to keep him as their defensive coordinator. Look, I want to be very clear on this. I would love to get Brian Flores as our defensive coordinator. I think he's exactly what we need. But I also think there are roadblocks here. He obviously very clearly wants to be a head coach. He wants that shot. That's fair. That's valid. I totally get it. I don't think the Commanders are that viable of a destination for him, honestly. I'd be a little surprised if he took their DC job. But if he does take a different job outside of Minnesota, it's all about positioning himself to become a head coach eventually. And here's where it gets interesting, though. Josina Anderson has reported that we still have interest in Brian Flores, so then why haven't we interviewed him yet? This is purely speculation, but I think it's logical speculation. We're doing all our interviews right now on Zoom. It's like phase 1, where we're casting this wide net. As the Zooms go along, we'll probably narrow it down for in-person stuff. Well, Brian Flores doesn't need a Zoom interview with us. He can skip that step. Raheem Morris could potentially skip that step as well as these guys go through their head coaching searches. So maybe, and yeah, maybe it's a bit of wishful thinking too, but what if we're just waiting to get to phase 2 and then we'll bring Brian Flores in for the in-person interview? That would make a lot of sense and wouldn't make us feel bad that we haven't done anything yet on that front. I mean, the guy knows what he's doing. He's proven himself in Minnesota, and bringing that kind of defensive mind to Dallas would be huge. So the bottom line here is that the process matters, and for once, it feels like we're actually conducting a real thorough search. We're not just going through the motions or hiring someone's buddy. We're looking at young coaches, experienced coaches, guys from different systems, guys with different philosophies. That's how you find the right fit. Now, we just need to make sure we get the hire right, because all this searching doesn't mean anything if we don't land the right person for the job.